Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Breath of Hope. Chapter 2, Found, Part 4. Elves clashed over and over again on the battlements. As they pushed against each other, Rand frowned down at his student. "You're better than this," he hissed. Rayla smirked a little. "No, not really. You had about 20 years more training." "Not your fighting skills. I mean your character," he clarified, kicking her in the stomach and off the tower. Somehow, Rayla caught herself on the far wall and pulled herself back up with a grunt. But she found herself under attack from arrows. Narrowly dodging them, Rayla sliced them away with her blades. Rand switched back to his blades once he saw it was of no use. After a brief clash once more, he backed off for a moment. Rayla made an effort to try again. "You saw the prince. There's no need for vengeance tonight." It was no use, and they continued the fight. Rayla panted heavily from the effort it took just to hold her ground against her mentor and leader. Eventually, Rand realized something and looked behind him to the king's tower. "You're just trying to stall me." "Interesting theory," she suggested casually, leaning on her blades with a confident smile. "Care to discuss?" He was furious at both her deception and her attitude. Your justice will come later, he vowed, and then turned to go forth on his true mission, jumping off the walkways and onto the other rooftops. Rayla desperately called for him to stop, but he ignored her. She attempted to follow, but he was too fast. So she decided to change direction and head for the tower, searching for where the princess could have gone to. She slid past a guard, still invisible to his eyes, before finding a cart of hay that appeared to be glowing. Parting it, she soon saw the dragon prince with his eyes screwed shut, tightly clutching bait. The toad glowed vividly and croaked. Not so good at hiding, this one, she observed, watching the prince open his eyes and smile softly at her. Rayla? Come on, we need to get you out of here. No, Ezran. Never mind the human. We need... No, he shouted, his strength returning again. I won't go without him. Even if he was weak, she couldn't fight him. Rayla sighed. All right, where did he go? To talk to his dad. Rayla's eyes went wide as she looked to the king's tower. Oh no, that's the last place he should be right now, she gasped and dashed quickly towards it. Inside, Viren looked down at the young boy he'd stolen the voice from. You impertinent little mongrel. You were spoiled and given everything, and that has left you weak and helpless. Tonight your world is changing, and there's nothing you or anyone can... He stopped, hearing the wind howl ominously within the tower walls, and the torches were all extinguished. They're here, Soren exclaimed, looking towards the entryway. Moments after, an arrow flew towards them, and the guards pushed Ezran away. He took a shot in the shoulder, but his armor stopped any damage. He pulled it out and stared at it before throwing it to the floor and drawing his blade. Defend the doors! As the guards all approached the one entryway, they could only just make out a figure that launched itself at one of them. Two were taken out in seconds, and they charged for a third. It wasn't long before a full-on fight was happening within the corridor. Amidst the confusion, Viren was knocked back, and he dropped the claw that held Ezran's voice, breaking the spell and returning it to the prince. Coughing when it returned, the boy stared at the door to his father's chambers. Dad! He yelled, but his voice was lost in the clashing swords and shouts. He felt tears in his eyes at how helpless he was, but he also felt the fear of being caught up in this confrontation. Suddenly, something grabbed his arm, and while he almost screamed out, he soon recognized the outline. He could tell it was Rayla. "Ez, we need to go," she whispered, keeping low to avoid the attention of the guards. "Callum needs you. Please." He looked at the door, then back at the fight, then at the elf, before finally nodding. He hurried with her down the tower, passing the bodies of those who had fallen. Outside, Callum was leaning on the edge of the cart with bait, looking at the pair as they returned. Ezran, did you... He stopped, looking up as he heard the swords clanging in the tower. A fearful gaze came to his eyes from some distant buried memory. Rayla saw the dragon prince's fear, but also the longing in the human's eyes. "Look, say the word and I'll go back into that tower," she offered, readying herself. Ezran looked at Callum, then at Rayla, and shook his head. "No, it's up to us now. We have to return Callum home. We need to keep him safe and get him to Xadia." "We could change things," Rayla said, hopeful and smiling. "We could make a difference. Just the three of us." At which point, bait jumped onto Ezran's head and croaked, turning red. The human chuckled and nodded. "The four of us." With a confident nod, they began to head out of the palace, Callum having gained enough strength to run short distances without stumbling. However, the others remained close for when his strength would eventually fail. They made it out of the castle and across the bridge, since most of the guards were busy with the attackers inside already inside. As they crossed the bridge, Callum had to pause for breath, and Rayla looked out for danger. Ezran glanced at the king's tower, thinking of the battle that had been going on. The dragon frowned when he saw his expression. Ezran? My dad he will be okay, right? Callum looked at him, then at the tower. I don't know. Rayla kept silent, but glanced at the silver ribbon on her wrist. We need to keep moving. Callum, you ready? Pushing himself up, the teen nodded, then began to run as best he could. Ezran kept looking back at the tower before turning to Bate. He has the finest guards in the kingdom defending him. He'll be fine. Yeah, of course he will, he told himself, and hurried after the others. Back inside, Ryan limped his way towards the king's balcony, bow in hand, and holding his side from a painful wound. However, he was determined to complete his task. As he walked, the silver ribbon on his arm turned blood red and unwrapped from him, falling to the floor. Somehow, he managed to draw the red and black Shadowhawk arrow from his back, tied the blood ribbon to it, and took aim at the sky. Each movement sent waves of pain through his body, but he lifted his head and said the words, Regina Draconis, before finally letting it go. The arrow glowed as it flew and became a bird made of red smoke, flying back to Xadia. At the castle, Ryan felt a sword at his neck and looked up to see one of the guards had survived, the mage's son. He turned and glared at him. Finish this. My pleasure, Soren huffed, raising his blade to decapitate the elf. No! No! Came a sharp voice. The mage's daughter stepped forward, anger evident in her eyes. We can find a more practical use for this one. Tie him up. The guards quickly moved to follow her orders and take Ryan away. Down in the city, Rayla jumped over a fence and into a common garden, which happened to have a line full of clothes. She looked over them and tried to find something suitable for Callum to wear. When she reached out for a shirt, she noticed the ribbon on her right arm turned red, loosened, and fell to the ground by her feet. She looked up just in time to see the shadow hawk fly over her head, another ribbon tied to its foot. She watched it go before hearing Ezran behind her. Psst, Rayla, what's going on? We need to go. Grab something. She glanced at him, then nodded, picking up everything she could think he'd need before stealing a pair of boots that were drying by the back door. Bundling them up for later, for when it was safe, she made her way back to the others and hurried with them out of the city and into the forest.